Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Laying Lines podcast. And this one is the spoiler episode for JUDD by JD Toombs and Erika Shulze. And I would like to welcome everybody. So this is going to be a bit of a longer one, so I would recommend that you sit down, get some snacks, go to the bathroom, whatever. So, my first topic for this episode is I would like to talk about the way that the world in this novel works. So, this novel takes place in a place called Comic Cove. Comic Cove is inhabited by superpowered people known as fragments. Now, if I'm remembering correctly, fragments is a callback to the source of everybody's power in the lore for this world. Also, before I get too far into this episode's my first time using a microphone, so I apologize for any background noise and any possible variation in the volume of my voice. So I just wanted to go ahead and get that out of the way. As I was saying, everybody being called fragments is a callback to the source of power in JUDD lore. And so one of the rules for Comic Cove is that in order to live here or go to school here, you have to have powers or be a fragment in general. So this puts JUDD, our hero, Sam, however you want to refer to him after you read the book, it puts him into a bit of a bind or a pickle or a predicament, whatever you so choose to say. And this is because Sam is, in fact, a blank. But his mom and his brother Dre both have powers. So, in order to get through this, Sam confides into his closest friends that he doesn't have any powers. And his friend Casey is more than happy to help him out throughout the rest of the book. And so, this, I believe, him being a blank is used as a way to symbolize his difficulties with the world, which all teenagers have trouble with the world. And I think if it is or if it is not, then it's a clever way to go about the book and to drive the story forward. I mean, because him being a blank is partially because of the secrets that he keeps, and by the end of the book, you'll understand everything for the most part. And so, to keep going, it's a clever way to also encapsulate his character growth throughout the book. Now, talking about his friends, specifically Casey, because I love Casey to death, and his brother Dre, it's one of those things where you get a book and it's really hard to pick what you like the most or what you don't like the most about the book. And I'll say that one thing these guys do great in this book is that the dialogue, and I mean the dialogue, it's organic and it seems to flow and it keeps your attention the entire time that character's talking, because each character interacts with another character differently, and the dialogue's either awkward, uncomfortable, or relaxed, confident, angry. Like, the emotions come across really, really well with the words by themselves. And I personally feel that if they wanted to, they could strip the dialogue from this book and it would still carry the story fantastically. And I like to think that with the dialogue, they carry over it very, very well when Sam comes into contact with characters that he feels an emotional attachment to, in a way of like secretly liking the person, or in other words, being very angry with a person, or just talking with somebody in general. It changes from character to character to character. And I don't know how else to put it. I think I put it pretty decently well for my ability to talk on a podcast. And I want to point out specifically for the relationship between Sam and his brother. They feel kind of like a character you would get with a show kind of like Malcolm in the Middle, or any show really that's a sitcom, and they have brothers and sisters in them, where they kind of like they pick fights with each other sometimes, and no matter what happens, when it comes down to it, they'll love each other to death no matter what, but they're going to argue, and if one of them gets in trouble, the other one's going to come to help. Now, granted, with Sam being a blank, Dre pulls his punches and gets what he wants out of it. And throughout the entire book, it's got some great teenage drama, like specifically with Sam trying to hide the fact that he's a blank. He goes to his friend Casey, and they come up with an idea of Sam having a power of mimicry. Now, this is talked about right at the beginning, because you need a superpower to be able to stay in the high school that they want to go to. And they talk a lot in the prequel to JUDD, and it's a book called Fragments, and I plan on doing a review for Fragments next. And it's just a short little novella. I think it'd be great to read it because the two flow well together. But they talk about how they wanted to go to this high school, and it being their dream high school. And so his friend Casey allows him to sort of use his powers, and I'm using air quotes because it's just like, it's one of those teenage plans where they concocted it all together. And this becomes very prevalent in one of the first little bits of the book. They do a test to prove that Sam has the power that he says he has. Now, later on in the book, with this being a book, a story, every story needs an antagonist, and with this one being like a superhero story, and a really good superhero story at that, you need a good set of villains. Now, this book has several villains that pop up here and there, and I'm not going to give away the I like to think he's the big bad of the story, but he's used to introduce a much broader range of villains that's going to pop up later on in the series. But I want to talk about specifically the first quote-unquote villains that we come in contact with, and they're the Shadow Fragments. Now, Shadow Fragments are not restricted to just these characters. I'm talking about these specifically because they are the first ones that pop up. These little assholes are known as Arcade, Valkara, Liliana. You can pronounce them how you want. These are how I pronounce them. Leave me alone. Leave my English alone, because I'm out here reading books for you so that you don't have to. This is not how that was meant to come out. I'm reading books so that you don't have to before you actually decide to go out and get them, because you want to listen to the stories on your own with your own brain words. Now, I wrote down my notes as Trio of Terror, but I'm going to call them this trio of shit starters for this episode. This trio of shit starters, when you first meet them, Arcade wants to flex his testosterone and uses his powers to pull the engine off of a fucking plane. Now, if that doesn't spell being an asshole just to be an asshole, I don't know what will. Now, so these guys decided they want to pick on Sam and his friends. Why does this tie in to Sam and Casey doing the whole mimicry thing? Well, you see, with these guys starting the shit that they started, Sam and two of his other friends have to fight them in an arena. And, well, to get by with this, Sam tells the coach that Casey is a pacifist, so that way Casey can be up in the stands and provide Sam with some backup, so to speak. And this leads into, like, the best, and I mean some of the best, description of superpowers that I have ever seen in a book. And it is fucking fantastic. I love it. Because I don't know. It's kind of like they describe it in what I like to call is like a ballet formation. Like for every movement, there's probably like a good 2-3 lines of description for it. And they don't go overboard with the detail either. It's like, it's just enough. Like, just enough. Kind of like if you got into a pool with the perfect temperature right off the bat. Because the greatest thing that I can think of is the combination between Sam and Casey. Like, Casey's up here in the bleachers trying to get by with, like, flexing his movements and stuff. And on the ground, you're seeing the response of these actions. And the funny part is, for this scene, even with how serious it is, Casey trying to hide the powers being used from Sam's mom, but Sam's mom's not stupid, I don't think. It's fantastic, is all I can say. And you will get to see a whole lot more when you read the book yourself. And I know that my descriptions leave a lot to be desired, but I want there to be a lot to be desired. Because even with me giving spoilers, I still want you to read the book, because I know there's going to be somebody out there dumb enough to listen to a spoiler episode before they go to buy the actual book. And I want you guys to go out and buy the book. But to continue on, the descriptions that they give, they kind of leave you on the edge of your seat, because you're sitting here and you're like, yeah, woohoo, victory, that type of stuff. And I don't read very many novels about superheroes. I'll read comic books about superheroes all day long. But I don't read very many novels about superheroes. I don't read very many novels outside of horror-fantasy. And when I say fantasy, I mean like sword fighting and stuff. But I think that this novel describes things perfectly well enough for it to appear in your mind as kind of like a comic book. And I'm just talking about a small, and I mean small amount of detail that they use to do it. And I mean, I want it to be a movie. I think it's good enough to be a movie, and I give the book overall like a well-deserved 10 out of 10. And I know this episode's not great, but I'm kind of nervous using the microphone that I have and probably recording this episode like 5-6 times, trying to get the microphone to work with the programs that I use. but I ended up having to switch some, so I'm kind of tired. I work third shift, so I haven't slept yet either. But I will give a more comprehensive overview review after I post my reviews of Fragments and I post an episode about how the two work well together. But thank you for listening, and go out and buy this damn book.